Bonjour à toutes et à tous et bienvenue dans une nouvelle vidéo sur Learn to French. Je m'appelle Eden et j'enseigne le français. Hello and welcome to another video on Learn to French. If you are new here, my name is Eden and I teach French. La vidéo d'aujourd'hui est un peu particulière. Il y a quelque temps, j'ai fait la connaissance de Shannon, une maman australienne qui est la créatrice du programme The Cultured Kid qui consiste à enseigner une langue à votre enfant à la maison. Nous avons donc décidé ensemble de faire ce partenariat. Déjà parce que j'enseigne le français aux adultes, mais j'aimerais aussi me développer du côté de l'apprentissage des langues aux enfants. So today's video is going to be a bit different. It's going to be on the longer side because I have recently met Shannon and she is the founder of the Cultured Kid program. And I thought that it would be interesting for you to hear what she has to say about teaching a language to your children at home. Of course, I would like to make it clear this is a partnership, an affiliate partnership, which means that if you ever sign up with my link, I will be receiving a commission. Now, let's meet Shannon. So, hi Shannon, how are you?
I'm so good, Eden. Thank you for having me here today. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you today on Learn to French. Before we dive in, I would love to know more about you, about your life, and would you mind introducing yourself to the audience first?
Yes, I would love to. So I am Shannon. I'm the founder of The Cultured Kid. You may have picked up, I have a very Australian accent. I am an Aussie mum. I've got 2 kids, and I'm the founder of The Cultured Kid. So we are a kids foreign language learning program that helps kids essentially age between like 2 to 8 years of age get started with a language really at a time when kids are really best hardwired to learn them. So I started that about 10 years ago. I live in Australia, again, hence the accent. And yeah, I really love what I get to do. So I love that we get to have this conversation today.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really looking forward to this interview and introducing you to the audience because I'm sure out there are plenty of parents who would like to teach languages to their children but don't really know how to or need guidance. I teach French, but as of now, I don't really know how I would teach English or another language to my own kids. So it's always good to have guidance.
Yeah, and I think that's the conversation we're having with a lot of parents all around, literally all around the world, is that, I mean, you speak English so beautifully, and you're fluent in English, but honestly, the idea of taking what you already know and then passing it on to a child in a way that is easily understandable, makes sense, is fun and engaging for kids. I find this is a conversation we're having both with people who are fluent in the language and especially parents who are not fluent in the language. So there's a lot of barriers that often parents come up against when they, start with the idea of wanting their kids to learn a language and then they quickly stop because it feels very, very scary.
Oh yeah, so I'm guessing that that idea, that thought was what inspired you to learn to launch the Cultured Kid program.
Yeah, look, for me, like everyone asks me because we offer 6 languages inside of our program, and first question everyone asks is, "Oh my gosh, you must speak all 6 of these languages." And I'm like, "Oh no, no, actually my skill set is I am a mum who was desperate for her kids to have access to additional languages, but genuinely didn't know how to in a sense, like your story, I didn't know how to actually get started with my own kids. And so a lot of my story dates back, and we started like 10 years ago now when my kids were literally preschool, like toddler preschooler age. And the reality was that I knew the benefits of languages because I learned languages at school and it took me all over the countryside. I did exchange. It was so good for me. And I knew that languages were really, really good for kids. But like you felt, like I didn't know, how to give that to my kids. And for me, there were no language play groups. There was no access to tutors. We didn't have a huge budget to bring an au pair in or, to travel to these countries where the kids could be immersed. But I knew that games and creating exposure to the language was a really great place to start. And that's essentially how I started as a mum. I knew what my kids loved and I knew what made them come alive. And so I was like, okay, if I can create exposure to the language, how do we start from there and then start to build up from there? And that was essentially how we got started here with my own kids when they were very little.
The passion sparked sparked the whole idea, right?
Yeah, and I think that's always the way. Like, if you have a dream in your heart for your kids, especially I think for parents, we all want the very, very best for our kids. And so for me, I knew what languages provided for me. Like for me, I learned German. And for me, I personally really wanted my kids to learn French. No, not dissing the German language, but there's just something about the French language that is just beautiful and romantic and, it's global. And so I think there's a lot to be said for parents who do have a dream in their heart. We're actually committed to seeing our kids really, it's that standing on the shoulder of giants. We want to see them go further than we can go. And so that was really what I did was I was like, okay, I could either choose to be scared of this and step back and know that my kids would never have that dream of, or the reality of going and becoming fluent and going to France and going and speaking and expanding their world. Or I could choose to be brave and go, you know what, I'm going to lean into this and I'm going to learn how to do this. And we're going to, even if it's just one word at a time, we're going to start and we'll learn a whole lot as we go forward. And honestly, that's just been our story.
Yeah, I think that's a great story. I've been teaching children. I've had children as well. In my French classes, and usually something started this. I mean, parents didn't know French at all, but there was something that started this love for languages or French specifically. Like, oh yeah, I want them to study in France or not have any trouble learning languages. Then I've had teenagers or young adults who've been telling me, yeah, I learned when I was a child, like briefly, but I would like to know more now because they either stopped or, yeah, they just lost interest during their childhood. So I think that this type of program would be really, how do you say that? Keep that spark alive, keep that flame burning. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right on that one. There's something really special, particularly in those early years, where for us, one of the biggest things I say to our families is the goal at this stage in those early years is not to try and force as much vocabulary down your child's brain. Like it's not like we're trying to push in and
Yeah.
teach them as much vocabulary so they learn. The goal in these early years is to really develop beautiful memories and to develop a love of the language. So whether they're playing in a language, whether they're reading books in French, whether they're, listening to songs, everyone knows when you teach preschoolers songs, they never, ever, ever forget them. And so to be able to actually create these experiences throughout the week, maybe it's a couple of, 15 minutes on a Monday and 10 minutes on a Friday, for example, finding ways to be able to build that language exposure to the French language, for example, is incredible. And what that also does is it's building memories between parents and children. And so there's this beautiful weaving of like really positive, beautiful experiences that are taking place with parents and with the language that as a child continues to grow, it actually fosters a desire for the child to continue to want to build on that. And so we've definitely seen that over the last few years is that love of language. If it's fostered well and done in a way that actually excites a child rather than, adds pressure and force to speak, it has a huge impact on whether a child will continue to go on and learn it as they get older.
Oh yeah, that's a great point actually. I've mentioned a while ago that in France the teaching system for languages, I think there are a lot of missing points. I think that it's not interesting enough for the children. So that's why a lot of children don't speak English in France, or other languages. Well, here some of them will speak Spanish because we're on the Spanish border, but other than that, it's like no, they just treat it as math or another like boring subject for children. So that's why, I think that you're like years ahead compared to
But
France,
I
at
think
least.
And I think as mums, we both understand if your child's not interested in something, they will absolutely not do it. If I tell my kids that they've got to go and do their chores, they're like, oh, roll their eyes, stomp their feet. Oh, they'll do it, but, they're not going to willingly do it. They'll drag their feet. Whereas I know that if you can find a way to actually make something fun, like we even find ways to try and make chores fun for our kids. Like there's lots of ways to be creative with that. But
Yay.
I feel like the goal is going, okay, kids don't learn languages the same way that adults do. Adults, we're fine with the rote learning. We're fine with, in a sense, the monotony. Kids, like we actually have to treat it very, very differently. And if we want to get the same results of going, okay, we often find within our languages, within the first couple of weeks of parents using our program, parents will write to me and they're like, oh my gosh, Shannon, she goes, my kids, we finished the first lesson. She goes, and my daughter, all she wanted to do was say, can we play in French again? Like if we can get the desire of our kids actually wanting to play in French,
Mm-hmm.
we can build on that. There are so many ways to build on that. And so if we get that foundation right, then I feel like we can then continue to really build to those levels of fluency quite easily because love has already been built there in those early years.
Yeah, there's a good base there. Yeah. How is your approach different to the usual ways? So you've mentioned play, of course, but is there anything that you'd like to develop on that side? Like how? Yeah, I know that the play is a big part, but is there something else that's really important for parents to know about your program?
Yeah, I think the thing that we've tried really differently, I think the biggest difference of what I've tried to do is actually create a program that's accessible to parents who aren't native speakers. We found a lot of families, we'd all have the dream of going, oh, I would love my kids to learn French, but then never had any it was always just a dream that they could never see realized because there was never any step for them to move forward. So the way we've tried to tailor our program has been to try and really make languages accessible to families. And so that really has been from the perspective of being able to go, we assume you have no knowledge of French at all. And so the way we've tried to create our lessons is really create almost like a journey between parent and child. And so we have created exposure at every level. Now we know that parents, they clearly are not fluent in the language and they don't, which clearly means they don't have great grammar and their pronunciation is probably quite awful. But that's okay. The resources and everything that we've structured the program around has been designed so that every parent can actually do the program with their child, with the idea that they don't actually need to be the expert in the language to teach the program. They just need to create the exposure to the language. And so the way we've structured it essentially is we have lots of very short form video vocabulary lessons where parents can actually watch these videos with their kids. So it introduces all of our core vocabulary. Kids are hearing pronunciation. They're hearing, native speakers actually introducing the language. And the beautiful part of that is kids pick up that pronunciation and they replicate it very, very easily in those early years. Parents are not so good at that, but the kids are really good at it. And so the way we've tried to continue that is essentially create lots of, we talk about multiple modalities, lots of different ways where kids can have exposure to the language. So maybe a child is really like that, have that auditory, they love listening to the words. We have audio books and video books that kids can watch and listen to the vocabulary, bilingual books that are woven through so parents can actually watch them with their kids and actually engage with them together. Even from a visual standpoint, our videos are a really great way to hear the words actually spoken, see what that immersive action looks like, for example, and understand comprehend quite easily. We also make sure that kids are actually speaking really early on. So the last thing we want to do is raise passive bilingual kids. We don't want kids who they can only understand, but they never speak. We're finding that from a very early within the first couple of lessons, kids are speaking really early because we actually put requirements for kids to actually speak, but in a way that actually excites them to speak. So, for example, in our videos, you'll be putting them on, we introduce the vocabulary, and then towards the back end of the videos, we're asking kids, what action is this? What animal is this? And we find that kids are yelling out at the video, it's a dog, it's a cat. Like they are automatically quite engaged. So there's that two-way response side of things. Again, one of those things, we don't want kids just sitting on screens because again, it needs to be two-way and involved. So what we've created is little mini lesson plans that parents can run with their kids. So yes, play is a huge component of how we engage kids, but we also want the parents to be involved because they're a trusted party. We want them to be leading their kids and making those memories. So a lot of games, physical games, interactive games where they're actually playing in the language, speaking in the language, it really means that there's a lot of fun happening in the lounge room. Lots of songs, books, interactive games. We've tried to really tackle it from every angle so that regardless of how a child specifically learns best, because we do find that kids have preferred learning styles, we're always making sure that we're able to engage them in those learning styles first, and then really starting to tackle the language with those other modalities as well that help kids learn it almost from a holistic standpoint, that reading, writing, listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how this can actually strengthen the bond, the parent-child bond, right? Like it's the parent is always there to, I mean, to lead. Basically, the parent is a leader, of course. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. I love that perspective. In your experience, what are the biggest challenges that parents and children might face when they're trying to learn a language at home?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones that we found, particularly for parents, is that whole I don't speak the language I talked about. I don't speak the language, I don't know where to start. And I think everything that we've really tried to build within the Cultured Home program. So we've got two programs that we offer. We offer one that's specifically designed for like for parents, for mums and dads to be able to run at home. We've also got a preschool childcare centre program as well. But particularly when we're talking about parents, um, I think a lot of parents, and I'd say most parents, are really scared that they're going to get it wrong. They're really scared that they're going to teach bad pronunciation, bad grammar, and all of a sudden, before parents have even started, they're feeling guilty. And so they get so scared at the idea of getting it wrong that they never actually take that first step. Um, I think that's a really big deal for parents. And I think it's one of the main reasons why I started this curriculum was because I know that that was my story when I first got started. And I nearly never got started. Like I nearly let that fear rob me of taking those steps because it's real, as mums, we're so busy, we're trying to juggle lots of things, language is not the only thing we're doing with our kids, with our lives, so many things to do. And so it's so easy for it to be just this idea of going, we could do this, but oh yeah, it's a bit too hard. So we'll put it over there for one day. And that one never comes. Um, so I think even like they're not speaking the language is really challenging. I think the biggest one again for parents is we don't actually have lots of time. And so the way we've tried to structure this program is not that you as a parent have to fit your life around this curriculum. The idea is that this curriculum actually fits around your schedule. And so for me as a mom, like I remember the juggle, like I had two kids, 16 months apart. Life was busy. And so
16
I
months
knew
apart? Sorry. Yeah.
crazy. We
I
just
thought
decided, I was like,
19 was bad.
no, we were crazy. We had one. The tricky thing was we had one. He slept really well. He was like a dream baby. And I was like, oh, this parenting thing's so easy. We've got one with minus one and two. Yeah. Yeah, you have two. And then literally we had two. And with my youngest was 6 months old, we moved to New York City. And I'm like, what have we done with our life? So you don't have time, right? Life is like constantly juggling. And so what I've tried to really do is, most people don't have 45 minutes a week to sit down and do a French lesson. It's not feasible. And so because of that, we go, oh, we don't have time. I can't do this. What we've tried to do is go, okay, 5 minutes is better than no minutes. And so rather than trying to do 45 minutes of a single lesson, we will break it up and we'll go, what does your week look like? Okay, what's that? You've got 5 minutes in the morning on Monday. You can watch a short video introducing vocab. And on Tuesday, great, let's just grab some flashcards and let's see if we remember any of the vocabulary from the video on Monday. And we've got books that you can do at nighttime. So as your kids are going to sleep, you can watch a book together and read and experience the program. You've got songs that you can put in the car when you're on the way to the grocery store. We're trying to find ways, rather than trying to go, you have to do this to fit into our program. The goal is, we're actually here to help your schedule and pick and choose what works for you. There's no condemnation if you can't do 45 minutes, but seriously, 5 minutes is better than no minutes at all. So that's always my encouragement.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so that's because yeah, as you mentioned, time can limit parents a lot. Like, oh yeah, I just got home from work. I mean, I know that I work from home, but even working from home, I feel like there are not enough hours in a day. So, is there any typical lesson? Is there a typical lesson that you would walk your child through, or as you've mentioned, is it always like on demand according to the parents' schedule?
Yeah, so we do have a recommended kind of
Mm-hmm.
process of can structure lessons.
Okay.
And we always say there's inside the program, we break it down. So you've got options. So we always walk it out that, you always know if you either want to do a 45-minute or a half an hour lesson, that's fine.
Okay.
We'll show you how to do that. Or if you want to do the 5 minutes a day, that's fine too. Essentially, the way we've really tried to structure it is every step of the way we want to support parents. So we always recommend starting the lesson with our vocabulary videos. Look, the reality is kids love TV, and we want to be able to use screens in a way that's actually going to be really positive.
Uh-huh.
So, instead of putting like Peppa Pig or Bluey on,
Uh-huh.
we 5-minute cultured kid video that introduces our core vocabulary. And the way we've structured the videos, kids are seeing other kids in the lessons.
Mm-hmm.
So they're immersive videos. There's no translation. We introduce all of the vocabulary through lots of other kids. So we put the video on, we sit down for 5 minutes, we introduce the vocabulary just so that the kids get a grasp of what the words mean. And the parent has a great idea of pronunciation as well. And then after the video, we generally have a really structured lesson plan that you can download or print out or just kind of have accessible. And it basically walks you through recommended ways to be able to now engage with the vocabulary. So we always do a bit of flashcard recognition so that we confirm that our kids actually know what these words mean.
Mm-hmm.
And then generally have about 3 or 4 different games that you can play that introduce play with these words. So for example, we were with kids today and we were going through our actions vocabulary and we had Simon Says. It's a game that most parents know. We play it in English, for example, all the time. But we can say Simon Says teaching actions vocabulary. And what kid doesn't want to play Simon Says? What kid doesn't want to actually play physical games? We basically just provide prompts for parents to be able to go, here are 4 different games that you can use to be able to play with your kid.
Oh
You don't
yeah.
have to think about it. You don't have to really plan anything. Everything is done for you. play these games. We've got a whole bunch of printable, great worksheets that kids can then continue the learning. So they're understanding vocabulary recognition, they've coloring sheets if your kids are a bit younger, but everything's designed to keep the reinforcement of the language going. We then, as we said, we've got lots of song playlists. So we break all of our playlists up into all of these different topics. So if we're camping around our actions vocabulary, for example, we have created all of these curated playlists of songs that include all that actions vocabulary. So your kids are not just hearing it in the video and playing with it in the lesson plan or seeing it in the flashcards or watching it on the video books. They're now hearing it in songs. And so we try and find lots of different ways to reinforce the vocabulary from lots of different angles. And then towards the end of the program, to kind of test to see how well your child's understood, we've got these really great interactive games. They're online games where kids can literally, drag and drop and word pop, lots of different online games that they can play. And kids love online games, but these are great. Parents can actually see, have they actually comprehended what we've just taught in this lesson? And that's how we're able to go, great, we're good here. We can now keep moving to the next lesson. So lots of different ways to engage.
Yeah. Yeah, kids are sponges. Like we say that in France. Like kids are sponges, meaning that they absorb everything and they can learn at a really fast pace. So I love how diverse the program is actually with that. And for some parents that have issues with planning and everything, that's also a great point that you have there. I have to admit.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. We've tried to just make not only languages accessible, but just really easy to actually run so that you're not having to, you're not sitting on Pinterest constantly trying to find a lesson plan to what to do today. And because oftentimes I find talking to parents, that we've got so many families who have started, hunting on Pinterest or looking on YouTube for a video to watch, but they then don't know how to build on that. And the challenge with that is oftentimes you can have a lesson that you started with a video, but you don't know how to increase, to expanded vocabulary, short phrases, for example. And you can find just relying on YouTube, for example, you can be doing it for a few months, but you've wasted months and you've not actually progressed. So we really want to make sure that everything that we've created in the curriculum actually starts to build and takes you in the direction of growth rather than just teaching, just a couple of words here and there over time. So that's always been.
Yeah, not every parent has a teaching degree, so it's quite challenging. How do you keep track, by the way, of the child's progress? Is there any way that you can follow up on the success of each child?
Yes, so very important. And that's one of the things we talk about with our parents a lot is we don't want you to just, do a lesson and then move on.
Yeah.
As adults, all we want to do is tick a box and go, great, they've learned that, let's keep moving. Kids are absolute sponges, like you said, and repetition is really, really important for kids. So rather than just doing one lesson, and then ticking it and moving on, you want to make sure you're finding different ways to engage our kids. So we've got lots of different ways that we find that we want to make sure that we're ticking that box to see that they are comprehending, they are understanding what's going on before you move on. So as I said, those assessment games that we've created are really, I always say that they're a little bit sneaky. They're a sneaky way to find out how well your kid's doing because kids want to do them. It's almost like an extra reward at the end of a lesson because they get to use the internet and play a game. Fear of them essentially is so that parents can actually see, okay, they have started to understand this. They are able to comprehend before we start to move on. So at the end of we have those printable structured lesson prompts. We do have assessment points at the end. So parents do know tick this box, make sure after playing this game, test to see if your child can understand all of those actions, vocabulary, test to see that they can do them. And the goal of all of those games is really a way to be able to see, are they tracking in the right direction as well? We want to make sure that kids we're not just skipping over and doing lessons, but not actually ensuring they're moving forward. So that's a really, really big thing. Also with the way we structure our lessons, we always start, when we're looking at thematic topics, because the way we structure our program is based around themes, actions, animals, numbers, colors, all about, family. We always start with just introducing core vocabulary first, so the kids get an understanding of some of those basic, keywords to start to build their vocabulary base. We then start to build phrases. So we never necessarily start with phrases, but we then start to little bit by little bit, as we can see, they're ticking the box, that parents can see that they are comprehending, they are moving forward. We then can very easily build on that from there moving forward. So we've definitely got ways that parents can feel confident to know that they are tracking in the right direction. And the good thing about it is, if their kids haven't quite yet got it, the good thing about kids is you can actually just redo those lessons, or find, watch those videos a couple of extra times throughout the week. They're 5 minutes. They're really easy ways to keep that exposure going, so that you're not understanding, maybe, if video is not the way to engage them because that's not their preferred learning style, maybe they actually just love listening to audiobooks or the video books that it's finding those multiple modalities to go, okay, so video's great, but we maybe need to pull in either some more worksheets or some more flashcards, for example, and they stay with us everywhere we go. So there's always ways to weave it in to see how they're tracking. It's just also, we've got steps in place, but it's also as a parent, and one of the best reasons why I think parents are the best teachers for their kids is parents know their kids really, really well. So they know what's going to make them come alive, and what's excited to learn. So that's the advantage that we have over tutors and au pairs, for example.
Yeah, I agree with that. But parents really know their children. Most parents,
Most parents.
Yeah, most parents. You get to learn your child. I'm guessing that once they reach like 2 years old, they we know when something is really needed, or if it's just a fit, or like when they're a baby, of course it's different, right? You teach them language. I've always been speaking to my babies, even in my womb, like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this. I would sing songs in English. I would speak in Filipino to them, but it's when they reach 2 years old, it's different, because they're I'd say this. It's a worldwide thing. The word that they love at 2 years old is no. So so I think that when you have something that could spark their interest, especially if you'd like to teach them a language, it's important to offer different things, like a buffet of things that they can do.
Yeah, because your child may say they're not interested in the videos, and that's okay. Like, that's okay. That's the thing, is there's an element of going, we actually want to partner with our kids in this space. We don't want to force it, because we force it, that becomes very, very clear.
Yeah.
So that's the beautiful part of parents actually knowing your kids so well, that when they're in that no period, sometimes no is just, all right, there's no lesson today. That's okay. You don't have to force the issue, because I think learning French, it is a marathon journey. It is not we're going to do this in 12 months.
So do you have any success stories that you would like to share with us, aside from yours, of course?
Okay, I do want to actually note, because I think most people go, who is this girl? She started a program and she doesn't speak French, but she wants her kids to learn it. One of the beautiful things I actually have loved is I actually work with an amazing team. So even to create this program, I think it's important to note that the way we've created isn't designed, I haven't just had a crack at French. We've had an amazing team of linguists who have brought this to life. And so to get back to your question about success programs, sorry, to get back to your question about success stories from some of our community. Yeah, we've got so many beautiful families who have actually seen beautiful success. So there is Corrie. I want to speak about Corrie. So Corrie wanted to teach her kids Spanish. Her story is very interesting because she was fluent in Spanish. She was a Spanish high school teacher. And so understood the language very, very well, as you can imagine. But she had preschool age kids, and she had, like you, in a sense, had no idea of how to actually take what she learned, in college and, in all of her studies and actually translate to her children. So one of the things that she found is, so she started first using the Cultured Home program when her kids were little, as almost like downtime activities for them. Her daughter wouldn't have her daytime nap while her son did. And so she started doing it with her daughter during this waking period, and it was like quiet time. And she really found that it was this really seamless, easy way to be able to introduce her daughter to in a way that actually made sense to her daughter. Then her son started picking it up, and they started using it together. And I think particularly if you're fluent in the language and you understand it very well, I think the biggest challenge can often be knowing how to structure a lesson for a child. And so to be able to have a plan there ready to go, to be able to go, oh, okay, I can speak, I can, take this language lesson and I can expand on it because I understand the language. But more importantly, I've got a framework of going, okay, step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. I have all of the resources done for you inside a program where I can log in, click on the portal, and everything is there to be able to do it. That was really helpful for her to not have to think about what do I need to do. It was almost like to be able to have a plug and play lesson. So for her, it made language accessible to her daughter because she didn't have a lot of time to plan kids' lessons because that wasn't a specialty. I think about Paige. We've got a beautiful homeschool mum, Paige. She lives in a bilingual province in Canada, actually. She always wanted her kids to learn French, and she had always been like, yes, you can learn French, but not yet. Yes, one day. Because they'd had exposure to French being in a bilingual province. But by not actually knowing the language, she felt so unable to actually give kids that access to it. And so she started with us about 2 years ago. And it meant that for her kids, she was able to not only start introducing French at home, and she does it in her homeschool lessons. It was really accessible because what that was actually going to do for her own kids was actually going to give them the opportunity to be able to have additional, jobs in the community as they grew up, be able to have a greater connection within their community because they, the French language was a requirement for a lot of the community. And by not having access, it was actually separating them. And so this was giving them the ability of actually really immersing them into their community and to be able to just really integrate them and to be able to start to build that fluency. So yes, they were around it, but now they had tools to understand it and really immerse themselves into it and lean in rather than lean out. So that was beautiful. We had Andrea. I've got these stories are all on our website. If you want to go and check out their stories, go and our website because they've shared a lot of them. But Andrea, she was actually have you ever heard of the idea of unschooling or world schooling?
Yeah.
So she decided that instead of, being at home and like just being at home and sending their kids to school or homeschooling, that they would actually travel and basically immerse their kids in the world. And their kids had been parents, and there was something about the French culture that her kids, they left France, but France never left them. And so it's beautiful, her story. She talks about it. She goes, her kids pretend that they're French all of the time, but they'd never had access to the language. And so there was this beautiful story about just the way that her kids would say, oh, I'm French because, I'd been there and I can maybe speak a few words.
Yeah.
When they started with the lessons at home, well, they would travel. They had like an RV and they'd travel all over the countryside. It just meant that they could keep that really big picture, worldly connection to the French. And we have a lot of French culture lessons that we've created. So we teach about Bastille Day. We teach about, French food. We even go into like the Tour de France, like it's beautiful. Like lots of different ways where we're not just teaching the language, but actually connecting kids to the culture and
That's important.
to the yeah, exactly. So I think even being able to give parents practical tools to be able to say, okay, it's not hard. You just need to know what to do. There's a roadmap for you to be able to. I think to be able to give parents the confidence, which for Corrie as a native speaker, her confidence came having the plan. From Paige, her confidence was like, okay, I can rely on videos with the pronunciation because I'm scared that I'm going to get this wrong. And Ali, for example, even, from a parent to be able to go, I can do this anywhere on the road. Like I don't have to go to tutoring. I think it just makes it beautiful. And I think if a parent can be confident, the likelihood of them continuing to build on that makes it makes a huge difference. So
it does.
that's
what it does. And from what you mentioned, I think it's also important to say that that this curriculum can be suitable for children that go to school but are also homeschooled or unschooled for some. It's really you can adapt it to the children and your lifestyle, right?
Yeah, and I think what's actually good to know as well is we have the way we've structured the program is you only need one subscription for the whole family. You don't need to have individual ones per child. So you can actually bring all of your kids in and actually do this journey together. We've found ways to be able to structure it so younger kids have different ways to be able to access the lessons, and parents can adjust the lesson for different age kids.
Yeah.
But the idea is it really is something you can do with your whole family and actually, day by day, week by week, start to really expand your kids' worlds. That builds, a love of French, for example, and it builds, their vocabulary. It really does raise global citizens. And I think even for me, like, I'm 10 years on now past, my kids are now teenagers, and we got to spend 10 days actually immersing in the culture. My son was ordering our coffees and our breakfasts, at the boulangerie. This April, I got to take my daughter with me. And there's just something, I look back, almost full circle at when I was a teenager at a similar age when I went to Germany on exchange and had some of those experiences. Yeah. And I'm like, this is blowing my mind how big the world is and my part to play in it. And I got to see glimpses of that in my own children. And I think there's something really beautiful about being able to pass this baton on and going, the world is a big place, but you have a part to play in it. And I don't think I could have ever imagined 10 years ago, starting with our French lessons when my kids were preschoolers, I don't think I could have ever imagined that we would have done those trips. So I think there's something really lovely about, as a mum going, I'm going to start this journey. You have no idea what's on the other side of that decision. But as a mum, 10 years on, I can tell you it's such a beautiful thing to be able to do. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I love the part where you mentioned that your son was able to order the coffee, and it's really impressive because usually you need the confidence for that. I mean, most of the, I mean, us as adults, we definitely do. Maybe children are a bit different, but yeah, they are. I know that my son can be shy, like really. I mean, he's only 2, but yeah, they can be really shy depending on their personality. And the fact that your son was able to actually do some stuff in French says a lot. It means like you learn something, but you're also able to practice that in the real world.
Yeah. Yeah. It was an adventure. Like they definitely had to work up to it. But I think having that exposure early on, like it really does normalize. Like I always say to parents, your kids don't know what normal looks like. So if you have the ability to add multiple languages into their world, that becomes their normal. And so the idea of them suddenly picking up and going to another country where they are immersed in that language, or they're like, not intimidated the same way a child would be if they've never experienced that language, but suddenly they're thrust into it. So I think even just those baby steps, that consistency over time, you just can't underestimate what it actually builds in a child as they continue to grow. So yeah, that would be my encouragement. Start early and just little bit by little bit, create that exposure, build on it. And yeah, you might actually find yourself in France with your kids. I remember riding my bike underneath the Eiffel Tower with my son. And I just have this memory of just going, we're riding bikes around the Eiffel Tower. This is insane.
Yeah, how lovely. I just wanted to, yeah, I think you haven't mentioned what languages uh do you have as of now in the curriculum?
Yes, so we started, our first language was French,
Yeah.
obviously. Um, we now have 6 languages. We now offer French, Spanish, Italian, German, Mandarin, Chinese, and English as well. So
Great.
we do have a few these days.
Wonderful. I think that yeah, it was really lovely listening to you today. I could listen to you all day long, but unfortunately, we wouldn't have the time for that.
No, thank you for having me. It's been so lovely. And look, in all honesty, if I could encourage any parent who has, obviously you have an incredible community of French language learners, on their own journey. I certainly was learning French as fast as I could so I could keep up, and pass it on to my kids. But if you can learn it for yourself, you only really honestly need to be one step ahead of your kids. You don't have to be fluent before you get started.
Agreed.
And
Yeah.
so my encouragement would be just to take a first step. And I think you might be surprised at what you might see as possible for your own family.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, great encouragement.
J'espère que vous allez apprendre beaucoup de choses aujourd'hui et n'hésitez pas à partager vos commentaires. J'espère que vous avez appris quelque chose aujourd'hui, surtout en tant que parent. Si vous souhaitez en apprendre plus sur le programme The Cultured Kid, n'hésitez pas à cliquer sur les liens dans la description de cette vidéo. And that's a wrap for today's interview. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you would like to know more about The Cultured Kid, make sure to check out the links in the description of this video.